Hey guys, so today I'm sharing a step-by-step process on how to paint a portrait in Procreate. This is going to be very beginner friendly and hopefully helps you guys in your quest to paint portraits. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so I've got my handy dandy sketch slash line art already set up here. I also have my reference to the left here. You don't have to use references, but I am a big fan of using them, especially for painting portraits, because it can really help you figure out where your lighting and shadows go, especially when you're starting out and you're unsure. So yeah, when I first get started, I like to go ahead and set my line art layer to multiply and make my lines more red. This just helps add warmth to my painting, and whenever I start color picking off the canvas later, it'll give me a lot more vibrant colors than if I just kept my lines black. You don't necessarily have to do this step, but I do recommend it. It just helps kind of add warmth to the painting later. So whenever we're painting portraits, I'm going to start with my base colors. And while I block in my base colors, I do want to talk about some kind of important parts to painting a portrait. Important parts to painting a portrait. And the first thing I want to talk about is the color zones of the face. So if you don't know what the heck that is, it's basically just this principle that the top of the face when you're painting tends to be a little bit more yellowish, the middle is more red, and the bottom is more blue. If you study classical paintings and the way that the masters used to paint, this is like evident in a lot of their paintings where you can see that they implement this, and it just helps give more of a realistic look to the face. In my style, I especially emphasize the middle section being more red. But depending on your style, you can just kind of incorporate these things and keep them in mind while you're painting. And you also want to emphasize your focal point. The focal point is where you want your viewer to look, which in portraits is typically the face, obviously. Also the hands sometimes if they're in view, like in this case. There are a lot of ways to emphasize a focal point, but whenever you're painting portraits, the biggest one to me is to put a lot of detail and effort into the face and then leave the other areas very minimal. You'll notice throughout this video that I barely touch the hair around the edges of the portrait, and this is why. So whenever you're painting, just try to keep that in mind. Once our base colors are down, we can start working on shadows. So the absolute number one, like chef's kiss, best piece of advice I could give you when you're painting portraits is to build your shadows up slowly. Don't try to go all in and add all of your darkest and lightest shadows at one time. Instead, try to add the lighter shadows and then add the darker ones and then the darkest shadows. I found that breaking it up like this really helps add depth to your painting, and that way all of your shadows are built up over the course of several layers, and you end up with a much better piece that way. And I try to keep all three areas, the skin, the hair, and the sweater, kind of at the same level. So once I've laid down the initial shadows for the hair, I'll go back and do that for the sweater and then the skin, and then continue to the next step. And my reference really doesn't have a lot of strong lighting and shadows here, so I kind of end up winging it here a little bit, but I'm starting with a very small airbrush and just kind of lightly placing my shadows on the skin where I see them. And then after I lay down these initial shadows, I'll alpha lock the layer and kind of add a reddish color to some of the shadows. This just helps add depth and bring some warmth to the shadows so it's not so dingy looking. I also add some blue to where her hair is laying on her forehead. That way I have a balance of warm and cool shadows. You'll also see me smudge out the edges a little bit if I need to. I do want to keep some of the edges just to have a balance of hard and soft edges. It helps it not feel so smooth. But yeah, you'll see me use my smudge brush a little bit. And then once I have those shadows down, I'll start to build up the sort of darker shadows, and I'll do the same process for the hair and the sweater, and I'll just continue to build up the shadows. Next, I'll start adding lighting. And again, my reference doesn't have a strong light source, but in general, you'll find that the lightest areas on the face are like the tip of the nose, the corners of the eyes, the cheekbones, and the chin. So I'll use an overlay layer and smudge the edges where I need to. And this is where I kind of start to go ahead and render, which is where I just start color picking colors that are on the canvas and sort of cleaning things up. And again, I'm mostly focusing on the face, so I won't do too much to the hair unless it's like near the face. And I do, if you're not really sure how to render or my rendering process, I do have a video on that that I'll link in the description below, and I'll also link it in the video. And then once I have the rendering done, I'll finish up and go and add in highlights and just like touch up the last couple of things. And sort of the last phase is mostly just figuring out ways to sort of elevate the painting in some way. This is where I might add like chromatic aberration or just things like that, or Gaussian blur sometimes. These are just like some final touch sort of things once I'm mostly done with the painting. I recently have really enjoyed painting portraits, so I was really excited to do this video, and yeah, I hope you guys found it helpful. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if there's another video that you want to see or another topic you want me to cover. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.